Hello and welcome to this week's bonus episode of Planet Critical, a podcast for a world in crisis. On this week's episode, I interviewed David Orr. He's a professor in environmental studies and politics at Oberlin College Emeritus. Now, David is also one of the founding fathers of the original environmental movement, and he joined me to discuss how the environmental movement failed initially by not being political, and ultimately how we need to restructure, rebuild, and save democracy in order to tackle the climate crisis. The episode essentially became about citizenship. How do we teach young people how to be citizens? How do we teach older people how to be citizens? How do we encourage people to understand that we fought for a democratic society, that we need to protect our democratic society, and that the only way to combat ecological crises is with a democratic society, and how education needs to adapt and change in order to fulfill that process. So he wants every single university student in the United States to graduate having done a module in Earth systems and also civics. And I think civics is a really, really great word. Everything around civility, citizenship. What does it mean to be a part of a community, to be a part of a society? Do we have an inalienable right to be a part of that society? I mean, one of the things that I brought up that we then discussed was the fact that citizenship has become such a passive thing in today's day and age. Very, very different to ancient Greece in the Agora when, the intellectuals would have their debates publicly. A crowd would gather and they could engage with it. There was, I can't think of the word now, but certainly in like Greek literature, there was always the chorus, and the chorus was meant to represent um, the people's feeling about what was going on. And that was reflective of the amount of participation in Greek democracy at that time. So what does it mean to be a citizen, and how can we make it a more active thing in which, rather than it being you're automatically a citizen and the only way that you lose your inalienable rights is if you break the law, so you go against the institution of citizenship. How can we make it more that we have to earn the right to be citizens in our everyday actions, whether that's being a decent member of community and whether it's looking after the ecology of your environment? And I think arguably that would have a sociological, if not psychological effect, whereby we don't presume that the planet's resources are just there for the taking, that we don't have a right to simply mine and and deforest and do what we want with the natural world, that we are a part of that natural world and we earn the place within that ecological system by caretaking. I think that that can be implemented politically. David obviously thinks that this can be implemented politically, and he's doing some really incredible work creating networks of universities and organizations and institutions to provide education, a public education, a climate job guarantees, for example, in different institutions, post-graduation, et cetera, et cetera. So I would really recommend that you go and listen to that interview if you haven't already. I think it's such an interesting question. What does it mean to be civil to one another and civil to the planet? What does it mean to be a citizen in today's day and age? David talks about how societies become increasingly fragmented and itemized, and essentially that's why there's often no real sense of community, especially in a capitalist consumerist culture. So what does it even mean to be a citizen in an atomized culture? Does it just mean to go to the polls once every 4 or 5 years? Does it mean that you're entitled purely to what that society has to offer you if you're lucky enough to be the class or race or gender or whatever it is that can afford you that entitlement? If there's no community, what is citizenship? Is it just a passport? Is it just where you pay your taxes? Is it just the rat race that you're born into now? That specific model, does it just have a cultural flair? Certainly, we don't really see ourselves as citizens of the planet, surely, otherwise we wouldn't allow refugees to die in boats off the coasts of perfectly wealthy nations that have the resources to protect them. And if we're not a citizen of the planet, and citizenship of nation state merely dictates what you can and cannot have, no wonder communities become so fragmented. No wonder discourse is rarely civil. No wonder politics doesn't engage so much with citizens and their citizenship, as opposed to fossil fuel money or big pharma money or whatever, certainly in the United States, whatever money is funding the elections. The problem, of course, is how do we organize the confluence of necessary models, structures, policies, adaptations, changes in order to create and fulfill a vision of a better world in which in which we have a definition for citizenship, in which we practice democracy and protect democracy, and in turn, that democracy protects the ecology of the world and the rights of others who belong to other citizenships. We discussed that on the podcast. The fact that because of the existing paradigm, whether it's economic or cultural, sociological, psychological, because of the existing paradigm, ultimately, what we could see is that certain models or policies get put into place, which are then sort of subsumed by the existing economic model. I think the green economy, carbon credits, is a really, really great example of that. We have an environmental problem, and the free market has suggested buying bits of the rainforest to protect them from the commodification of logging purely through another mode of commodification. That's what happens when a good intention gets essentially filtered through the current paradigm, which is a place for opportunists to exist, to extract whatever it is they want, or they want, I was going to say need, but whatever it is they want from the current situation. So it's the fact that education needs to be updated, citizenship needs to be updated, politics needs to be updated, consumption needs to be reduced. We need to transition our energy source, and every other topic that comes on the podcast. All of these things need to happen at the same time, as Jason Hickel points out on a previous episode. Otherwise, they are going to be marred and rendered ineffective by the current powers that be. Everything that David's talking about is really effective long-term strategy that also needs to converge with extremely effective short-term strategy, whether that's voting in, I don't know, a green radical, whether it's voting in a socialist, whether it's people self-organizing on the ground. And he says this is really, really important in creating co-ops and creating community projects. All of these actions need to be taken whilst we implement the longer term strategy of updating and refining our education and the process of civility and coexisting both together and with the planet, because if we don't, we're in trouble. I would be really interested to know what projects are happening where you are. Do you know of any co-ops? Do you know of any community projects? Do you know of people who are self-organizing, who are essentially completing that short-term strategy or enacting that short-term strategy, whilst the bigger pieces of the puzzle are getting moved around by people that have access to those pieces of the puzzle? Please put it in the comments below. Let us know. And maybe, I don't know, listeners far and wide, maybe you can link up with each other. Maybe you can share some information about things that are available in your location. Also, let me know what you think of these bonus episodes. Let me know what you think of the podcast episodes. Put it in the comments. And also, if there's anybody that you want me to interview or any topic that you want me to cover, please put it in the comments. I will see it, I will reply, and I will get on it as quickly as possible. You can also find out more about the project if you're new here at planetcritical.com. You can subscribe there, or you can also subscribe on this YouTube channel. If you're enjoying Planet Critical, if you're getting a lot out of the podcast, support the project on Patreon. The links are in the description box below. To everyone who is supporting Planet Critical, thank you very, very much. And you allow me to invest the time I need every week to make this podcast as good as it can be. So thank you. All right, that's enough from me this week. Thank you all for watching. I hope this was valuable. I hope it was interesting. If you've got anything to say, leave it below. I will get back to you, and I will see you next week.